I still remember how the mailbox creaked that morning. One of those ordinary Tuesdays in October that shouldn't have been memorable at all. The sky was overcast, threatening rain but never quite delivering, much like my relationship with my family for the past decade. When I pulled out that cream-colored envelope with no return address, something in my stomach tightened. I'd recognize that handwriting anywhere. The perfectly slanted letters. The way she dotted her I's with tiny circles instead of dots. My sister, Charlotte. I stood there on my front porch, mail clutched against my chest, as if delaying the moment would somehow change what was inside. My neighbor waved from across the street, and I automatically smiled and waved back. Nobody needed to know that my hands were trembling. Inside my kitchen, I set the rest of the mail aside and stared at the envelope. No stamp. She must have dropped it off herself, which meant she had been here, at my house, but hadn't knocked. That stung more than I expected. "Just open it," I whispered to myself, sliding my finger under the flap and tearing it open. The note was brief, written on expensive stationery, the kind our mother always kept in her desk for important correspondence. Only 5 sentences, but each word felt like a tiny knife. After much discussion, we as a family have come to a decision. I've been chosen to speak for everyone. You're no longer considered one of us. Please respect our wishes and stop attempting to contact any family members. This is final. It was signed simply, Charlotte. I read it 3 times, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less cruel. They didn't. My legs gave out, and I sank onto a kitchen chair. The morning light streamed through the windows, landing on the family photo I still kept on my refrigerator, my parents' 40th anniversary 5 years ago. Everyone smiling, everyone together. A lie, frozen in time. I traced my finger over our faces. Mom, Dad, Charlotte, my brother Michael, and me. We looked happy, like a real family. But even then, the cracks were forming. That was the last family event I'd been invited to. The estrangement had been gradual, like water slowly eroding stone. It started after I decided to sell my portion of the family business, a chain of furniture stores my grandfather had started. I wanted to go to culinary school, to follow my own dreams instead of his. My father hadn't spoken to me directly since. Charlotte had been the mediator at first. "Give Dad time," she'd say. "You know how he is about the business." But as months turned into years, her calls became less frequent, her excuses more transparent. Michael followed her lead, as he always had. I tried. God knows I tried. Birthday cards sent but never acknowledged. Christmas gifts returned unopened. Voicemails that disappeared into the void. And now this. An official excommunication, delivered in my sister's perfect handwriting. My phone rang, startling me. For a wild moment, I thought it might be one of them, having second thoughts. But it was just my best friend, Lena. "Hey, you still coming over tonight for wine and that new show?" she asked, her voice cheerful and normal. So blissfully normal. I cleared my throat. Yeah, of course. "You okay? You sound weird?" I stared at the letter on my kitchen table. "I'll tell you tonight." After we hung up, I sat in silence, watching the minute hand on my kitchen clock make a full circle. Then another. Outside, it finally started to rain, fat drops hitting the window pane in an irregular rhythm. The numbness was wearing off, giving way to something else. Not sadness. I'd used up my sadness over the years of gradual rejection. This was different. A slow-burning anger that straightened my spine and dried my eyes. I walked to my office and took out a sheet of my own stationery. Clean white paper, nothing fancy. If Charlotte could speak for the family, then I could finally speak for myself. The words didn't come easily at first. I started and stopped, crumpling several attempts. What do you say to people who have decided you no longer exist? What words could possibly matter? And then suddenly, I knew. The truth. All of it. Not just my side, but theirs too. The things we'd never said to each other's faces. The way favoritism had poisoned us from childhood. The impossible standards. The conditional love. I wrote for an hour, filling 2 pages front and back. When I finished, my hand was cramping and my eyes were burning, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I reread what I'd written, making no changes. It was raw and honest and long overdue. I addressed an envelope to our family group chat email, the one I'd been removed from last year, but still remembered. I scanned my handwritten letter and attached it as a PDF, typing just one line in the body of the email. My response to Charlotte's letter. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I did this, there would be no going back. No pretending everything could somehow still be fixed. I pressed send. The immediate ping of my own phone receiving the email made me jump. I'd forgotten I was still on the distribution list, even if I couldn't post, which meant that right now, at this very moment, every one of them was getting my response. Mom, Dad, Charlotte, Michael, aunts, uncles, cousins, all 23 members of the Patterson family group. I set my phone down and walked away from it, heart hammering in my chest. What was done was done. I would not hide from the truth anymore. That evening at Lena's, I told her everything. About Charlotte's letter and my response. She listened quietly, refilling our wine glasses twice. "So what exactly did you say in your letter?" she finally asked. I took a deep breath. Everything I should have said years ago. My phone stayed silent that night, and the next morning, and the day after that. I went through the motions of my life, teaching my cooking classes at the community college, working on recipes for my blog, walking my dog along the river path, all while carrying a strange electric tension inside me. Waiting. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was elbow deep in bread dough. It was Michael. I stared at his name on the screen, my flour-covered hands frozen in midair. After wiping them hastily on a towel, I answered just before it went to voicemail. "Hello?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. There was silence on the other end, followed by a long exhalation. "It's me." 5 years of silence, and that's what he opened with. "It's me," as if I wouldn't recognize my own brother's voice. "I know," I said, leaning against the counter to steady myself. "What do you want, Michael?" He cleared his throat. "Your letter. The family has been discussing it." "I'm shocked Charlotte allowed that," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "That's the thing," he said slowly. "She didn't really have a choice after you sent it to everyone." He paused. "Did you really mean what you wrote? About the business? About what Dad said to you that day?" I closed my eyes, remembering the words I'd committed to paper. The truth about how our father had told me I was dead to him if I sold my shares. How Charlotte had been given the position I'd worked for since college, without even having to interview. How our mother had sided with them, as she always did, because keeping the peace was more important than standing up for what was right. Every word, I confirmed. I have the bank statements and emails to prove it, if anyone wants to see them. Michael was quiet for so long, I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice smaller than I remembered. "I didn't know about most of it. Charlotte always said you left because you were jealous of her promotion." A harsh laugh escaped me. The promotion that was originally promised to me? The one I found out about through the company newsletter rather than from my own father? That promotion? Why didn't you ever say anything? I tried, Michael, for years. None of you would listen. The line went quiet again. I could hear muffled voices in the background. "Are you with them right now?" I asked, my heart suddenly racing. Are they listening to this call? No, he said quickly. Well, not Dad or Charlotte. Mom is here though. She wants to talk to you. Before I could process that, there was shuffling, and then my mother's voice came through the speaker. Emma? The sound of my name in her voice, a voice I hadn't heard directed at me in so long, made my throat tighten painfully. Hi, Mom. Your letter, she began, then stopped. I heard her take a shaky breath. I had no idea about what happened with the promotion. Your father told me you turned it down because you wanted to go to that cooking school. He lied to you, I said simply. I'm beginning to see that, she replied, her voice tense with emotion. And what you wrote about Charlotte's wedding, about being asked to help with all the preparations but then being seated with distant cousins at the reception. Why didn't you tell me how much that hurt you? Would you have done anything differently if I had? The silence that followed was answer enough. We've made a mess of things, she finally said. Yes, I agreed. You have. Can we... She broke off. Would you be willing to meet? Just you and me, to start with, perhaps for coffee? My heart lurched with a hope I thought I'd buried years ago, but my self-preservation instincts kicked in immediately, tamping it down. I don't know, Mom. I've spent years trying to be heard by this family. Now suddenly everyone wants to listen. Just because I finally said everything at once instead of in pieces? It feels like too little, too late. I understand, she said, and I was surprised by how much that simple acknowledgement meant. But I'd like to try, if you're willing. I closed my eyes, thinking. I'll consider it, but I need time. Of course, she said quickly. Take all the time you need. Just don't shut the door completely, please. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, stunned. 3 days of silence, and now this. It wasn't at all what I'd expected. Later that evening, another email appeared in my inbox. From Charlotte. The subject line simply read, I'm sorry. My finger trembled as I opened it. Emma, I don't know where to begin. Your letter has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself and our family. I've spent the last 3 days rereading it, getting angry, denying it, and finally, painfully, accepting much of what you wrote as accurate. I was wrong to send that letter to you. More than that, I was wrong in how I've treated you these past years. Competition between us has been so normalized in our family that I never questioned it, never saw how toxic it had become. I told myself I deserved everything I got, that your departure was your own fault. What you wrote about Dad's manipulation, how he's played us against each other since we were children, how he used the business to control all of us, it's made me see things I've been blind to. Michael and I have been talking about it constantly. Even Dad seems shaken, though he won't admit it outright. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Not yet. I know I haven't earned it. But I am asking if we could talk. In person. When you're ready. With regret and hope, Charlotte. I read the email 3 times, searching for the manipulation, the guilt trip, the subtle dig that usually characterized my sister's communications with me. I couldn't find it. A text from Michael followed an hour later. For what it's worth, she really means it. We all read your letter together. No one spoke for a full 3 minutes afterward. Dad walked out. Mom cried. Charlotte kept saying, "This can't be right," until I reminded her about the wedding seating and she broke down too. Something's changed, Em. I think you finally got through to them. I didn't respond to any of them that night, or the next day. I needed to sort through my own feelings first, the cautious hope warring with years of learned distrust. They'd hurt me so deeply, for so long. Could I really risk letting them back in? On Saturday, I met Lena for our weekly run along the river. After 2 miles, we stopped to catch our breath on a bench overlooking the water. "So what are you going to do?" she asked, taking a swig from her water bottle. "About your family?" I watched a pair of ducks navigate the current, sticking close to each other. "I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to believe they can change. Another part is terrified of being hurt again." "What does your gut tell you?" I considered this. That something real is happening. My letter shocked them in a way I never expected. I turned to face her. "But even if we try to rebuild something, it can never be what it was before. Too much has happened." "Maybe that's a good thing," Lena suggested. What was before clearly wasn't working. She had a point. The family dynamic that had existed before, with its unspoken rules, its favoritism, its conditional approval, had been slowly destroying me. If there was a chance to create something healthier, something based on honesty instead of pretense, wasn't that worth the risk? That evening, I sat down at my computer and began composing careful, individual responses. To my mother, I agreed to coffee the following week at a neutral cafe halfway between our houses. To Michael, a simple thank you for his honesty, with an invitation to talk more when he was ready. And to Charlotte, the hardest one to write, a brief acknowledgement of her apology and a request for time. As I pressed send on the last email, I felt a curious lightness. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first step toward something new, something true. The next morning, I walked to my mailbox again. No cream-colored envelopes this time, just the usual bills and flyers. But as I turned back toward my house, I noticed something on my front porch that hadn't been there before. A small potted plant, a peace lily, with a handwritten card tucked beside it. I recognized the handwriting immediately, but this time it didn't make my stomach clench with dread. The card read simply, "For new beginnings, when you're ready. C." I picked up the plant and carried it inside, setting it on my kitchen windowsill where the morning light could reach it. It was a small gesture, perhaps too small given everything that had happened, but it was something real, something honest. And for now, that was enough. A week passed. The peace lily on my windowsill unfurled new leaves, stretching toward the sunlight. I watered it carefully each morning, this fragile symbol of possibilities. Wednesday arrived, the day I'd agreed to meet my mother. I stood in front of my closet, deliberating longer than necessary over what to wear. Something in me wanted to look successful, put together, to show her that I'd thrived despite their absence. Another part just wanted to be comfortable for what would inevitably be an uncomfortable conversation. I settled on a simple blue dress, professional, but not trying too hard. As I fastened my grandmother's silver bracelet around my wrist, I caught myself rehearsing what I would say, what I wouldn't say, the boundaries I needed to establish. The cafe was busy when I arrived, 15 minutes early. I claimed a table in the corner, positioning myself so I could see the door. Old habits. When my family was involved, I always wanted to see what was coming. At exactly 2:00 p.m., she walked in. My mother, Elizabeth Patterson, scanning the room with the same precise attention to detail she'd applied to everything in her life. Her hair had more gray than I remembered, swept into the elegant updo she'd maintained for as long as I could recall. She wore a cream blouse and tailored slacks, pearls at her throat, her armor of propriety. Her eyes found mine. For a moment she hesitated, and I saw something unexpected flash across her face. Nervousness. My always composed mother was nervous. I didn't stand when she approached. Small rebellions. "Emma," she said, her voice soft as she slid into the seat across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." "You're welcome," I replied, my tone carefully neutral. An awkward silence descended, broken when the waitress appeared to take our orders. Mom asked for Earl Grey, her standard. I ordered a cappuccino. You look well, she offered once the waitress left. I am well, I said, meeting her eyes directly. My cooking classes are full this semester. I'm developing recipes for a possible cookbook. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. A cookbook? Emma, that's wonderful. The genuine enthusiasm in her voice caught me off guard. In the past, my culinary pursuits had been dismissed as a hobby or phase, never something to be celebrated. Thank you, I said, feeling oddly disarmed. Our drinks arrived, creating a welcome distraction. Mom stirred a thin slice of lemon into her tea, a ritual I'd watched countless times throughout my childhood. I've been thinking about what to say to you, she began, setting her spoon down with a gentle clink. I've drafted and discarded a dozen different speeches, but in the end, I think the simplest version is best. She took a deep breath. I failed you, Emma, as a mother, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry. I stared at her, searching for signs of the performative apologies I'd received in the past. The kind that were really about making her feel better, not addressing my hurt. But her eyes held steady, filled with a regret I'd never seen before. You allowed Dad and Charlotte to push me out, I said quietly, and you did nothing to stop it. She nodded, pain etching lines around her mouth. Yes, I told myself I was keeping the peace, that your father knew best when it came to the business, that you were strong enough to weather it. Her voice cracked slightly. I told myself many things to avoid facing my own cowardice. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, absorbing its warmth. Why now, Mom? Why are you willing to acknowledge this now, when you couldn't for 5 years? She was quiet for a moment, considering. Your letter, she finally said. The way you laid everything out. Not just what was done to you, but how it made you feel, what it cost you. It was impossible to deflect or rationalize away. She looked down at her tea. And perhaps I'm finally tired of maintaining the illusion of a perfect family at the expense of actually having one. I felt a tightness in my chest. And Dad? How does he feel about this meeting? A shadow crossed her face. Your father is struggling. Your letter challenged everything he's built his identity around. His control of the family, the business, the narrative. He's angry, defensive. So nothing's changed there, I said flatly. I wouldn't say that, she replied carefully. He hasn't torn up your letter or deleted your email. He reads it repeatedly, actually. I've seen him. And he's asking questions about your claims, not to dismiss them, but like he's trying to piece together what really happened. I absorbed this information, not sure what to make of it. And you're here without his blessing. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes, for the first time in 43 years of marriage, I'm directly going against his wishes. A small, sad smile touched her lips. It's terrifying, and somewhat exhilarating. I felt a surprising urge to laugh, which I suppressed. I'm familiar with that combination. We sat in silence for a moment, less awkward than before. I want to be clear about something, I said finally. I'm willing to try rebuilding a relationship with you, and maybe eventually with Michael and Charlotte. But I need to know this isn't just temporary remorse that will fade once everyone feels better about themselves. I can't go through losing my family twice. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. I understand, and I can only prove my sincerity through consistent actions over time. But I want you to know, her voice wavered, I've missed you every day, every single day. Something in me cracked at those words, a hairline fracture in the wall I'd built. I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in this public place. Tell me about your cookbook, she said gently, giving me space to compose myself. What kind of recipes will you include? Grateful for the shift, I began describing my concept, modern takes on comfort food classics, with an emphasis on techniques that home cooks could master. As I spoke, I noticed how intently she listened, asking thoughtful questions without a trace of the dismissiveness that had characterized so many past conversations. We talked for nearly 2 hours, about my work, her volunteer activities, neutral topics that allowed us to re-establish a rhythm of conversation without venturing into more painful territory. As we prepared to leave, she hesitantly mentioned a family matter. "Your cousin Abigail is getting married in the spring." She paused, watching me carefully. "She's asked about you several times over the years. I think she'd very much like you to be there." I tensed, memories of Charlotte's wedding surfacing. "I don't know if I'm ready for a family gathering of that magnitude." "Of course," she said quickly. "It's just something to consider when you're ready. If you're ready." She gathered her purse. "Would it be all right if I called you next week? Perhaps we could do this again?" I nodded, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "I'd like that." We walked out together, pausing awkwardly on the sidewalk. Neither of us seemed to know the proper goodbye. A handshake felt too formal, a hug too presumptuous. Finally, she reached out and squeezed my arm gently. "Thank you, Emma, for your courage, for giving me this chance." After she left, I stood there for a long moment, absorbing what had just happened. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. 3 days later, Michael texted, "Free for lunch tomorrow? Just us." We met at a deli near his office. The moment I saw him, I was struck by how tired he looked. Dark circles under his eyes, his normally immaculate appearance slightly rumpled. "Rough week?" I asked as we settled into a booth. He ran a hand through his hair. "You could say that. The family business is complicated right now." "Because of my letter?" "Partly," he admitted. "But also because I've started asking questions I should have asked years ago. About how decisions are made. About Dad's methods." He met my eyes directly. "About how you were treated." The server came to take our orders. When he left, Michael leaned forward. "I need to apologize to you, Emma. I saw what was happening 5 years ago, and I did nothing. Worse than nothing. I sided against you because it was easier." "You always followed Charlotte's lead," I said, not unkindly. "It was simply a fact of our family dynamic." He winced. "Yeah, the middle child's path of least resistance." His expression turned serious. "But I'm done with that. I've been talking to a therapist, actually, trying to figure out why I let myself become a pawn in Dad's power games." This surprised me. In our family, therapy was viewed as an admission of weakness, something for other people with real problems. "That's big," I said. "How long?" "Since right after I read your letter." He gave a self-deprecating smile. 3 sessions in, and I'm already seeing our whole family history in a different light. Our food arrived, his usual Reuben, my chicken salad. Some things hadn't changed. "Charlotte told me you responded to her email," he said between bites. She was relieved. "We're meeting next week," I confirmed. "I'm still not sure what to expect from that conversation." Michael nodded. "She's different since your letter, Em. Quieter, more reflective. She and Dad had a massive argument last weekend. I've never heard her stand up to him like that before." "About what?" "About you, mostly. About how the company handled your departure. About the narratives we all accepted." He hesitated. "And about some of Dad's recent business decisions. Apparently there's been some ethical gray areas that Charlotte's been uncomfortable with, but never confronted until now." I absorbed this, feeling a complicated mix of vindication and concern. "And Dad?" Michael's expression tightened. "Still Dad, but shaken. He's not used to being challenged, especially not by Charlotte. His perfect successor." The bitterness in his tone was new. He keeps saying everyone's turned against him, that we're rewriting history. Are you still working for him? For now. He pushed his plate aside. But I'm updating my resume. I think it's time I found out who I am outside of Patterson Furniture. I nearly choked on my water. Seriously? You've been there since college? Exactly. Following the path laid out for me, never questioning. His eyes met mine. You were the brave one, Emma. You got out, built your own life on your own terms. I shook my head. It wasn't courage so much as survival. I couldn't stay and remain myself. Well, whatever it was, I admire it. He paused. Would you help me with my resume? I haven't written one in a decade. The request was so unexpected, so wonderfully normal that I laughed. Sure, of course. As we finished lunch, Michael asked tentative questions about my life, my friends, my cooking, the small catering business I'd started on the side. He seemed genuinely interested in the person I'd become, rather than measuring me against family expectations. When we parted, he hugged me, brief but real. I'm sorry it took so long for me to be a better brother. We're figuring it out now, I said. That's what matters. The meeting with Charlotte loomed all week. Despite the progress with Mom and Michael, I found myself increasingly anxious as the day approached. Charlotte and I had always had the most complicated relationship. Fierce competitors one moment, protective allies the next. Our father's manipulation keeping us perpetually off balance with each other. We'd agreed to meet at my place. Neutral territory felt wrong for this conversation, too public for the rawness required. When my doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m., I took a deep breath before answering. Charlotte stood on my porch, looking both familiar and strange. Her blonde hair was shorter than I remembered, her usual polished appearance slightly subdued. She held a small gift bag. "Hi," she said, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I gestured her inside. "Come in." She stepped into my home, her eyes taking in the space. The colorful, eclectic decor so different from her own minimalist aesthetic. Her gaze landed on the peace lily by the window. "It's thriving," she noted softly. "I have a better track record with plants than I do with family relationships," I replied, instantly regretting the edge in my voice. Charlotte flinched but didn't fire back as she once would have. Instead, she extended the gift bag. "This isn't a peace offering exactly, more of an acknowledgement." Warily, I accepted it. Inside was a small leather-bound book. I recognized it immediately. Grandmother Patterson's recipe journal, filled with family dishes passed down through generations. It had always been intended for me, the one who loved cooking from childhood. But after the estrangement, I'd assumed it went to Charlotte by default, like everything else. "How did you get this?" I asked, running my finger over the worn cover. "Dad gave it to me after Grandmother died. I think to spite you." She met my eyes directly. "It was always meant for you, Emma. I should have given it to you years ago." I clutched the book, unexpected emotion welling up. "Thank you." We moved to the living room, sitting across from each other. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 5 years of unspoken words. "Your letter," Charlotte finally began, "forced me to see myself in a way I never wanted to. The sister who betrayed you. The chosen one who stepped on you to rise higher." Her voice cracked. "The person who wrote that cruel note and thought she was justified." "Why did you write it?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since that day. After 5 years of silence, why make it official like that? She looked down at her clasped hands. "Dad suggested it, after I told him you'd tried to contact Michael about possibly reconciling. He said we needed to cut ties cleanly to protect the family harmony." Her laugh was hollow. "And I did it, without questioning, like the perfect soldier I've always been." You said you spoke for everyone. I thought I did, she admitted. But after your letter, Michael was furious with me. Said I had no right. Mom cried for days. Even some of the cousins reached out, asking what was going on, saying they missed you at gatherings. She looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I realized I'd only been speaking for Dad, and myself, my own fear. Fear of what? That you were right to leave, that I was complicit in pushing you out, that the business, the family, the whole structure we've built our lives around might be poisoned somehow. A tear slipped down her cheek, that I sacrificed my sister for a life that doesn't even make me happy. The raw honesty in Charlotte's voice stunned me. My sister, always perfect, always composed, was falling apart in my living room. Are you unhappy? I asked quietly. At the company? She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. I'm good at it. The work itself. But the politics, the constant need to prove myself to Dad, the knowledge that I only got the position because you left. She shook her head. It's hollow, Emma, and exhausting. I leaned back, studying her. This wasn't the triumphant Charlotte I'd imagined all these years, reveling in her victory over me. This was someone trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. Why didn't you ever reach out before now? I asked. Even once? She met my gaze, unflinching in her culpability. Pride, fear, and a narrative I'd convinced myself was true, that you abandoned us, that you were selfish for choosing your own path. Her voice softened. Mostly, though, I think I couldn't face what I'd done. How I'd betrayed you when you needed me most. I felt a tightness in my chest, years of hurt pressing against my ribs. You were my sister, Charlotte. My big sister. When everyone else turned against me, I thought at least you would understand. I know, she whispered. There's nothing I can say to make that right. We sat in silence, the weight of lost years between us. What changed? I finally asked. After you read my letter, what was different this time? Charlotte took a deep breath. You laid it all out so clearly. Not just what happened, but how our family operates. The patterns. Dad's manipulation. The way he's always pitted us against each other. She paused. And you included things I'd forgotten or blocked out. Like when we were teenagers and he gave me your car as a surprise after you'd saved for 2 years to buy it. I winced at the memory. He said you needed it more for college interviews. And I believed him, she said bitterly. Just like I believed him when he said you weren't interested in being VP of operations, that you'd told him you wanted out of the company. She looked at me directly. That was a lie, wasn't it? I nodded slowly. I'd been working toward that position for years. Dad knew it was my dream. Then suddenly it was announced in the company newsletter that you had been promoted. No one even told me beforehand. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this. He told me you were focusing on finding yourself and weren't ready for the responsibility. Her voice hardened. He's been playing us our entire lives, Emma, and I was his perfect pawn. The realization seemed to physically pain her. I felt a surprising impulse to comfort her, but held back. We weren't there yet. Have you confronted him? I asked. Yes, she said, and I heard new steel in her voice. Last weekend, it didn't go well. He denied everything, said I was being manipulated by you. A mirthless laugh escaped her. The irony was apparently lost on him. And now I'm reevaluating everything. My role in the company, my relationship with him. She hesitated. And most importantly, my relationship with you. If you're willing to try again. I studied her. This sister who had been both my closest ally and worst rival throughout childhood. Who had written the letter that broke my heart, and now sat in my living room asking for another chance. I don't know if we can go back to how things were, I said honestly. I don't want to, she replied quickly. How things were was broken. Toxic. She leaned forward. But maybe we could build something new, something healthier. A tentative hope flickered between us, fragile as a candle flame. It would take time, I warned, and boundaries, clear ones. I understand, she said. I'd respect whatever limits you need to set. We talked for hours after that, haltingly at first, then with increasing openness, about our childhood, about the competition our father had fostered between us, about the years of separation and what we'd each lost in that time. When she finally rose to leave, near midnight, Charlotte paused at the door. There's something else I should tell you. About Dad. I tensed. What about him? He's been asking about you. Not directly. He's too proud for that. But he keeps bringing up old stories. Times when you stood up to him. Projects you excelled at. She met my eyes. I think he misses you, in his own way. I absorbed this, not sure what to feel. That doesn't mean he's ready to acknowledge what he did. No, she agreed. But it might mean he's not as immovable as we've always believed. After she left, I sat with grandmother's recipe book in my lap, gently turning the yellowed pages. Her handwriting, so similar to my own, detailed family dishes I'd grown up with. Pot roast for Sunday dinners, lemon bars for summer picnics, the secret Patterson apple pie that had won county fair ribbons for 3 generations. In the back, I found a note I'd never seen before, dated shortly before her death. To Emma, who understands that food is love made visible. These recipes aren't just instructions. They're our family's heart. Share them, adapt them, make them your own. Some traditions are meant to bend so they don't break. All my love, Grandma P. Tears blurred my vision. She'd known somehow that I would be the one to break from tradition, to forge my own path. And she'd left this message of support, hidden where only I would find it. The next morning, I woke to a text from Lena. How did it go with the Ice Queen? She'd never been Charlotte's biggest fan, with good reason. I typed back, surprisingly honest, still processing. Coffee later? Absolutely. Usual spot at 2? The day passed in a blur of routine tasks, my mind continuously circling back to the conversations of the past week. By the time I met Lena, I felt emotionally wrung out. You look like you need something stronger than coffee, she observed as I slid into our booth. I smiled weakly. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows you well. She studied me over the rim of her mug. So, the family reconciliation tour continues? I filled her in on the meetings with my mother, Michael, and Charlotte, watching her expression shift from skepticism to cautious support. It sounds like they're genuinely remorseful, she conceded. Especially Charlotte. I never thought I'd see the day. Neither did I admitted. It's disorienting. After years of having a clear narrative, them against me, suddenly everything's complicated again. And your dad? Still radio silence? I nodded, stirring my coffee absently. According to Charlotte, he's showing signs of something. Not remorse exactly, but awareness maybe. Lena snorted. Richard Patterson? Aware of someone else's feelings? That would be a first. I know. It's hard to imagine. I sighed. Part of me doesn't even want to think about reconciling with him. He was the architect of all of it. Then don't, she said simply. You don't have to forgive everyone at once or ever. This isn't an all-or-nothing situation. Her words landed like permission I hadn't realized I needed. You're right. I can rebuild relationships with Mom, Michael, and maybe Charlotte without having to tackle Dad. Exactly. Take it one relationship at a time. Set your boundaries. Protect yourself. As I drove home, I felt a new clarity. This wasn't about returning to the family fold as if nothing had happened. It was about creating new, healthier connections with individual family members who were willing to acknowledge the past and commit to a different future. The following weeks brought a gradual, tentative rebuilding. Weekly coffees with my mother, where we cautiously explored topics we'd never discussed before. Her own childhood, her regrets about letting my father dictate so many family decisions, her genuine interest in my culinary career, weekend brunches with Michael, who was actively job hunting outside the family business and seemed lighter each time I saw him. Even occasional texts with Charlotte, sharing small moments of our days, carefully rebuilding trust one message at a time. And then, a month after that first letter arrived, another cream-colored envelope appeared in my mailbox. My father's handwriting this time. I stood on my porch, heart racing, afraid to open it. Finally, I carried it inside and set it on my kitchen table, staring at it for a full hour before finding the courage to break the seal. Inside was a single sheet of Patterson furniture letterhead. My father's precise handwriting covered half the page. Emma, your letter has forced a reckoning I've been avoiding for years. Your mother, sister, and brother speak of nothing but you now. The family dynamic I cultivated for decades has shifted in ways I neither anticipated nor welcome. I find myself reflecting on decisions made and paths not taken, on the cost of maintaining control at all costs. I am not prepared to concede all your points. There are perspectives you've overlooked, contexts you couldn't have known. But I am prepared to acknowledge that in my determination to build a legacy, I may have damaged something more valuable: my relationship with my youngest daughter. If you are willing, I would like to meet. Not to debate the past, but to consider whether any kind of future is possible. Your father, Richard Patterson. No apology. Not exactly. But from my father, this was seismic, an admission of imperfection, an acknowledgement of loss, a request rather than a demand. I set the letter down, hands trembling. All these years I'd imagined confronting him, forcing him to see what he'd done. I'd never really considered what would happen if he actually showed a willingness to listen. That evening, I called my mother. "Did you know Dad sent me a letter?" I asked without preamble. Her intake of breath confirmed she didn't. "What did it say?" I summarized the contents, hearing her soft, "Oh my," when I mentioned his acknowledgement of damage done. "Emma, this is unprecedented. In 43 years of marriage, I've never known your father to admit he might have been wrong about anything. What do you think he wants?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think he's genuinely shaken. The family structure he controlled so completely has been upended. Charlotte is talking about taking a sabbatical from the company. Michael is interviewing elsewhere. I've stopped playing peacekeeper at the expense of truth." She paused. "And you? The one he thought he could simply write out of the family story. You've catalyzed all of it with your letter." I considered this. "Should I meet with him?" "Only you can decide that," she said gently. "But if you do, I'd be happy to be there with you if you want support." Her offer, to stand with me rather than with him, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I'll think about it." For a week, I carried his letter with me, reading and rereading it, trying to decide what to do. I talked it through with Lena, with my therapist, even briefly with Michael and Charlotte in separate conversations. Everyone had an opinion, but ultimately the decision was mine alone. Finally, I composed a response. "Dad, I'm willing to meet. Not to pretend the past didn't happen, or to resume our relationship as if 5 years of estrangement didn't occur, but to see if there's a path forward based on honesty and mutual respect. I suggest next Saturday, 1 p.m., at Riverside Park near the old boathouse. A public place, but quiet enough for a private conversation. Emma. Short, direct. Boundaries clearly established. I mailed it the next morning. His reply came by text, a first in our family's history. Saturday at 1 p.m. is acceptable. I'll be there. As the day approached, I fluctuated between anxiety, anger, and a reluctant hope. What would I say to the man who had orchestrated my exclusion from the family? Who had never once reached out during 5 years of silence? Whose approval I had spent my entire childhood desperately seeking, and whose rejection had nearly broken me? Saturday dawned clear and crisp. I dressed carefully, casual but put together, a silent statement that I was doing just fine without the Patterson name or resources. Driving to the park, I remembered countless family picnics there in earlier years. My father teaching me to skip stones across the river. The time Charlotte pushed me into the water and he'd fished me out, wrapping me in his jacket despite its expensive fabric. Complicated memories of a complicated relationship. I arrived early, claiming a bench with a view of both the river and the parking lot. At exactly 12:55, I saw him walking toward me. Richard Patterson, still imposing at 68, his silver hair and tailored clothes projecting the authority he'd always worn like armor. But something was different. A slight hesitation in his step, the absence of his usual commanding posture. He looked older, more human somehow. He sat beside me, leaving a careful distance between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, both watching the river flow past. "Thank you for coming," he finally said, his voice gruffer than I remembered. "I almost didn't," I replied honestly. He nodded, accepting this. I would have understood. Another silence stretched between us. "Your letter," he began, "was difficult to read. It was difficult to write." He turned slightly to face me. "Much of what you wrote challenged my understanding of the past 5 years, of our family dynamics before that." I met his gaze directly. "It was the truth, Dad. My truth, anyway. I'm beginning to see that there can be multiple truths in the same situation," he said carefully. "Yours, mine, Charlotte's, your mother's." This acknowledgement, small as it was, felt monumental coming from a man who had always insisted on being the sole arbiter of reality in our family. "Charlotte tells me you're working on a cookbook," he said, shifting topics abruptly in a way so characteristic of him that I almost smiled. "Yes, modern comfort food." He nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "You always had talent in the kitchen, even as a child. I remember those lemon squares you made for my birthday when you were, 12? 11, I corrected, surprised he remembered it all. "Best I've ever had." He cleared his throat. "Your grandmother always said you inherited her touch with food." I thought of her recipe book, now proudly displayed in my kitchen. She encouraged me when others didn't. He absorbed the gentle rebuke without comment. We watched a family with young children feed ducks nearby, their laughter carrying across the water. "I made mistakes, Emma," he said finally, each word seemingly pulled from deep within him. "In how I handled your decision to leave the company, in how I communicated, or failed to communicate, with you afterward, in allowing the rift to grow until Charlotte felt justified in sending that letter. It wasn't a full apology or acknowledgement of the manipulation I'd outlined in my letter. But from my father, it was unprecedented." "Why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. Why was it so unforgivable that I wanted a different path? He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. "Fear," he finally said, the admission clearly costing him. That the business my father built, that I expanded, might not continue as I'd envisioned. That all my sacrifices might have been for nothing. He looked at me directly. "And perhaps some wounded pride that you didn't want what I'd spent my life creating for you." The honesty, partial but real, caught me off guard. "I never rejected you," I said quietly. "Just the path you'd chosen for me without asking." He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand the difference." We talked for over an hour, not resolving everything, not erasing the hurt, but taking first steps toward understanding. He didn't apologize in so many words, but he listened in a way he never had before. And when I spoke of the pain his actions had caused, he didn't dismiss or deflect. As we prepared to leave, he hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I brought something for you. Not a peace offering exactly, more of an acknowledgement." He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a key, old-fashioned brass. "The key to grandmother's kitchen cabinet," I said, recognizing it immediately. The cabinet where she'd kept her most treasured cooking implements, the ones that had been in the family for generations. "Yes. She left instructions that it should go to you. I didn't honor that at the time." He met my eyes. "It's yours now, along with everything inside. Whenever you want to collect it." I closed my fingers around the key, feeling its weight. Not just metal, but history, heritage, belonging. "Thank you," I said simply. We walked to the parking lot together, an awkward distance between us. Not the chasm of before, but not the easy closeness we'd likely never have again. At my car, he paused. "Would you consider," he began, then stopped, reformulating. "Your mother mentioned a family dinner. Just the 5 of us, when you're ready." I considered his offer, feeling neither the automatic rejection of months ago nor an eager acceptance. "Maybe, eventually, but I'm not there yet." He nodded, accepting my boundary without argument. Another first. "Whenever, if ever, you're ready. The invitation stands." As I drove home, I realized I felt lighter, not healed, not completely. The fractures in our family couldn't be mended in a day, a month, perhaps even years. Some breaks change you permanently, but there was movement now, space for something new to grow in the cracks. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and began testing a recipe for the cookbook, Grandmother Patterson's apple pie with my own modern twist. As I worked, I found myself thinking not just of the past, but of possible futures. A family changed, but not erased. Relationships rebuilt on honesty rather than expectation. Boundaries respected rather than ignored. I remembered the last line of my response to Charlotte's letter, words I'd written in a moment of raw truth. Family isn't about blood or business or appearances. It's about showing up. It's about seeing each other clearly and loving anyway. It's about choosing each other, again and again, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. I don't know if the Pattersons are capable of being that kind of family, but if you are willing to try, truly try, then perhaps so am I. As the scent of cinnamon and apples filled my kitchen, I realized I was finally at peace with that uncertainty. Whatever came next, reconciliation, redefinition, or something in between, I would face it on my own terms, with my boundaries intact, and my worth no longer tied to their acceptance. My voice had finally been heard, and in the end, that was what had mattered all along.